Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL reporter Joe Fisher, we're going to talk about highway patrol chases. In 2022, the North Carolina Highway Patrol chased more than 1,000 drivers. 7 people died, 13 were hurt, and this represents a huge increase in chases since 2019. Joe, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So your story really starts with a very touching story of a man who was in another car. He just happened to be on the road when there was a chase. And tell me what happened to him, to Thaddeus Mickens.
So this was an early morning chase in May of last year, 2022. So not too long ago, about 8 months. And there was a pursuit that was started by the Highway Patrol. They were chasing a woman, trying to pull her over for speeding. And this was a chase that got up to 112 miles an hour when the woman crossed the center line on Highway 301 in Kenly, which is in Johnston County. And she slammed head on into a pickup truck with 3 people inside that car. 2 of them died. The driver of that truck survived. But that crew of 3 people, they were just simply headed to work on a normal morning. 2 people ended up dying as a result of this high-speed chase.
So basically, they were innocent bystanders. I mean, they were just doing their normal routine that morning, and they just happened to be got in the middle of this. So Mickens was one of the people who was killed. I know that, we've spoken with his family, and it begs the question. I mean, why is it so important to chase this woman, this driver, on a 2-lane highway in a small town? And I know his family's asking that same question.
So I think that Thaddeus Mickens' family is concerned because they don't view speeding as necessarily a significant enough crime to chase this woman through town. The Highway Patrol says that speeding is very serious. It can lead to someone's death, and they actually put speeding above other crimes like an expired license tag or something of that nature. So they view speeding as something very serious, something that they need to stop the person right away. And that's what's in their policy. Thaddeus Mickens' family says they really wish that these kinds of pursuits were only done for people who are accused of very violent crimes, homicides, bank robberies. And that is something that we've talked to a lot of experts about too. And they too would like to see these pursuits more limited than what they are now.
And this story and others got you thinking about policies surrounding chasing drivers. So what did you learn about the North Carolina Highway Patrol policies regarding when to chase, when not to chase?
So the policy is pretty broad, and it allows troopers in this case, because we're talking about the Highway Patrol, pretty wide discretion as to when to start a chase. Now, a supervisor is immediately looped in, and the supervisor is responsible for deciding whether to continue that chase. But we have found out that many of these, overwhelmingly 60+% of these chases, are initiated because of speeding.
And so, obviously there's a thought process of, okay, so when there is a chase, do you get a review? In other words, does the Highway Patrol review and say, should we have done this? Should we not have done this, so they can learn from it? What have you learned about that?
So there's a pretty intense scrutinization of these pursuits. Every single pursuit is reviewed by at least 3 supervisors. And then there's actually a review board made up of about 8 members within the Highway Patrol that actually go back. They not only review the circumstances surrounding the chase, but any body camera video, any dash camera video, and they decide whether the chase was within protocol or not within protocol.
That's some great insight. We'll be back after the break with more from Joe Fisher on what he learned after doing a public records request for Highway Patrol chases in 2021. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with Joe Fisher about his investigation into Highway Patrol chases. Now, Joe, I know you did a public records request. You got some data back about these chases. Some of it is pretty alarming. Tell me what you learned.
Well, as we were just referencing, there is this decision that needs to be made. Was the chase within policy or was it not within policy? And the most recent comprehensive data we have is from a Highway Patrol report of all of the chases that were done in 2021. There were 896 chases that year. And this analysis was kind of shocking because 238 of those chases, so we're talking about more than 25%, about 26% of these chases were not within policy. And as we continue to dig into the data here, the number of pursuits has skyrocketed. In 2019, there were 454 of these chases statewide. Last year in 2022, there were more than 1,000, which is a 131% increase.
That's a huge increase. And I guess, have you learned why, or is anybody saying why that might be?
It's really interesting because the why in this story is something that we don't really have a lot of information about. The Highway Patrol said in a written statement, because they did decline multiple requests for an interview. We wanted to sit down and talk with Colonel Freddie Johnson. He declined multiple requests to sit down and talk about this, but we did get some written responses back from the Highway Patrol, and they really put most of this increase on the fleeing drivers. And it does seem like their position is that more people are fleeing from the police. They're not stopping. They are not having the respect to stop for the blue lights and sirens. So the Highway Patrol says they've had no significant policy or procedural changes on their part that would attribute to the rise of these pursuits. And like I said, they say the decision to not comply with a traffic stop and attempt to flee falls on the driver of the violator vehicle themselves.
Now, I know you talked to an expert for your story about, maybe the vagueness of the policies, also the stress on officers having to make these decisions on the fly. What did he say?
The expert I talked with, his name's Jeff Alpert, and he has been looking into pursuits since the 1980s. So we're talking more than 30 years here. He's a professor at the University of South Carolina, and his position on this is that chases should be limited to violent crimes. The story that we have put together shows how innocent people can die because of these chases. And if there are more limited policies, he believes that there will be fewer of those deaths on the road.
So I'm curious, we talked about speeding as one of the reasons that the Highway Patrol will chase a driver. What are some of the other reasons, and what did you find out kind of the majority of the reasons are?
Yeah, speeding is by far the largest. When you look at a pie chart of these chases, like I mentioned, more than 60% are because of speeding. Some of the other reasons are for registration violations, equipment violations, stopping at a stop sign, avoiding a check station. A very small number are because of DWI or stolen vehicles, hit and runs, careless and reckless driving. All of these different offenses can initiate a pursuit, but by and large, the initial violation is speeding.
And I know you talked about this, but I want to circle back to it. You did ask the Highway Patrol for a sit-down interview. They did not grant you that. Did they give you any response to your story?
Their response was that the people who were getting pulled over on the road, for whatever reason it is, need to stop. And it does seem like we're in this position right now where more people are not stopping for the police. And a lot of these chases, I think it's important to point out, are not necessarily high-speed chases down the road. Some of these last only a quarter of a mile, a half a mile. Sometimes these chases are called off in the middle of it, but the chases are happening more frequently. The Highway Patrol's position is that people need to stop, and it does seem like there's either an increase in the speeding offenses or other offenses, or an increase in people eluding the police.
Well, I know you're going to continue to follow this. Thanks, Joe, for your excellent reporting on this topic. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email waiting in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.
Leave a comment and share this video with your friends. With daily uploads, there will always be a conversation.